Hello and welcome to my final conversation of my FEC. I'll just jump right in. The first thing I want to show you is a demo of my proxy server. So I'm going to pop into that real quick. This is a proxy for each of our services. I have done something kind of unique here, and that is what I'm going to be talking about later, the trials and tribulations getting to this point. What I have done is set up a router and a specific framework to handle passing down the URL parameters to each individual services. Now you can see it does take quite a bit of time, and that was actually a lot quicker than it usually loads, but it does take quite a long time to get this page to load, but that is because I'm using a bit of a hacky way to get this figured out. There are better ways to do it, but in order to do that, I'd have to learn an entire new framework. But as you can see, this is responding to that URL parameter and loading the services with the correct product ID. Anyway, I will continue now just to discuss how I got to this point. So basically, I've been trying since like Tuesday to figure out how to dynamically pass the URL parameter into the services. So I started by using React Router to allow for a dynamic handling of URL parameters just for my service, which was not too hard, although I did run into a poorly documented issue that I had to solve with a Stack Overflow. I won't get into that though, because that's not the main point of this talk. That main point is that the real trouble came when trying to pass down variables from the proxy server to the services. So my first thought was just to create a React app on the proxy server and use React Router to pass down the URL parameters. But unfortunately, this turned out to be a lot more difficult than I bargained for, because there was no way to pass the parameters down to the bundle. You see, we were using Express static to serve our dist folder for each of our services, and then just making a script tag that sourced to the bundle on each of our services on their respective ports. And then those bundles were getting, using React DOM rather, to render to a specific div that we'd put at different places in our page on the proxy server's HTML. But because of that, there's no way to pass down a parameter to the bundle. The bundle's already been built, and it does not have a reference to that product ID. So after 2 days of trial and error, I figured out two pieces of information that were really important. First, the architecture that we're working with is called micro frontend. It's not called microservices. And so when I was looking for all this information about this problem with microservices, I wasn't getting anything, because no one was referring to this problem with respect to microservices. They were referring to this problem with respect to micro frontends. And second, after I found that out, I found that bundling microservices onto one page is actually a lot harder than you would have thought. It's a relatively new thing, I guess. They used to be more monolithic, and now they're starting to be available in micro versions, but it's new. And so it would seem that there are several frameworks that make this easier, but it can also be done in a fairly hacky way using iframes. And that's what I decided to do, because I didn't want to learn a whole new framework. So this presented its own challenges, which I won't go into here, but suffice to say that it took some work, but now I have a functioning, if slow, front end built from several micro front ends. That is dynamic with respect to the URL parameters. So that is my talk. I hope it was useful. Thanks.